Hashem, we're recording the daf Yomi for Shabbos, a very interesting daf. Menachos 41. We're going to start around 10 lines from the top. On Rabbanon, Hawas Kafua Chayevet Petzitzis. So we have a brayso which says that if you have a garment that is worn folded, so then you have to put tzitzis on that garment, whereas Rabbi Shimon Poter, Rabbi Shimon exempts you. What we're talking about here is a garment that's twice as big as it's supposed to be, and so or it needs to be, and so therefore it's folded in half, and the fold is near the top, near the head, and the open ends are hanging down. So by folding it, there are new corners basically at the crease. So by folding it, there are new corners at the crease. So the Tanna Kama says that you require tzitzis on these two corners and on two of the loose corners that are hanging down. So that's a six-cornered garment. So Rabbi Shimon says that you don't require tzitzis on the crease, since the talus should be, since when it's unfolded, the tzitzis will be in the middle. So, okay, back to the text of the Gemara. So it says, Tan Rabbanan, talus kafua chayeves b'tzitzis Rabbi Shimon pater. So Rabbi Shimon exempts it. V'shavin, but they both agree. They both agree she'im kafua utefarash chayeves, that if you folded the garment and sewed it to ensure that it remains folded, then they both agree that it requires tzitzis. Since it's for sure going to be remaining like that, then we're going to put it on the two corners in the crease and two of the other corners. So the Gemara says, Tafra Pshita, well, it's obvious then. The Gemara says, L'tzricha denakta b'sichai. No, where Rabbi Shimon admit, even if you fastened it like in a temporary manner, with not permanent sewing. So Rab Bar Huna Ikula Be Rav Bar Nachman Chazeh Dave Mikase Talis Kafuli. So that he was wearing a folded garment. Rami Lechuta Ilav Kafila, and he put tzitzis on the corners of the crease. If Shitei Va'asa Chuta V'Kamla De Reisha. Eventually, it became unfolded, and the tzitzis threads came up, and they were by Rav Nachman's head. So this is not what the Torah said corners, because these are by your head. Also, so Rav Nachman put it off, put on another garment. So he says that doesn't accomplish anything. You think that it's the obligation on the person, it's an obligation on the garment. Zil Ramile, go put the tzitzis on properly. Meaning to say, you now have to put the tzitzis on properly. So, let's bring a proof for this. Once they wove three of it, they would put the tchelos on it, which means to say that even before it was ready to be worn, they put the tzitzis on it. Even though we said earlier, basically they would put the tzitzis on before they finished. So that's what we saw earlier. So we see from here that tzitzis is the obligation on the man even before the garment was finished. Gemara says, "Shavin Chasidim de Machmaria now." You know, these pious people, Chasidim are different. They're strict upon themselves. Upigi de Malacha, and this opinion of Rav Bar Huna is there's an angel that argues with him. He argues with the angels. The Malacha asked Rav Katina de Mikasi Sadina, and the angel found Rav Katina while he was wearing a linen garment, and it had no tchelos on it, because we said above that rabbinically you don't have to put on tchelos on a linen garment. Amalei Katina Sadina v'kaita v'sarbo v'sitva. He said Katina You wear a linen garment in the summer and a woolen cloak that's round in the winter. Tzitzis al tchelas mataheoel. Where's your tzitzis of tchelas? I'm away. And shisu say. So Katina said to him, I'm not going to get punished. You get punished for not doing a positive commandment? Meaning to say, if I do this, it's a mitzvah. So Amarle, the angel said, Bisman ika rischa anshinan. Yeah, you will get punished when heaven is basically in an angry mood. He's going to punish those who don't do the mitzvahs of tzitzis. Now, if you want to say that tzitzis is an obligation on the man, that's why a person is responsible. He doesn't put the tzitzis to the garment and wear it. But if it's on the talis, on the garment, he's not obligated. So the Gemara says, so you want to say it's an obligation on the individual. Even if you want to say it's an obligation on the individual, if the garment is not required to be worn, he's not supposed to put it. So this is what the angel was telling him. You're engaging in, you seem to be engaging in tactics to get out of the midst of tzitzis. And that's why you're susceptible to the anger of Hashem. Hold on one second. Okay. Amar Tuvi Bar Kisna Amar Shmuel. Klei Kufza Chayavim B'tzitzis. Let's say you have clothing that are in a drawer. Those are obligated in the mitzvah of tzitzis. Umod Shmuel Bezakein Sha'asal Chvodo Sheptura. And Shmuel admit that if there's an elderly person who made this garment so that it'll be buried in, that's exempt from tzitzis. My timer. Asher Tachasa Ba Amarachmana. Torah says, "He cover yourself." And high lavli kisuye avida. This was not meant to be covered, and so therefore, it doesn't need tzitzis on it. He shot a away, but when the person hold on one second. When the person is going to die, we should at that time we certainly should put the tzitzis on his burial shroud. Because one who mocks a pauper insults his maker. Means to say, when a person dies, and if you don't put on the tzitzis, it looks like you're mocking the deceased, because he's no longer obligated in the mitzvah of tzitzis. And so therefore you should for sure do it. But nowadays, people have the practice to put on the tzitzis that are not valid. They cut off the tzitzis at the final action. So, meaning to say, because we're not supposed to wear the tzitzis out because we can't do it. So it became a custom to cut off the tzitzis. But that is a whole dispute. And it's I'll go into this on Shabbos. What's the basis for that practice and the history of it? Amar Chava, Amar Yehuda, let's say there's a garment that was torn further than 3 finger breadths from the corner. You can sew it. Toch shalosh lo yitpor. But if it's torn within 3 finger breadths, you can't sew it. So therefore, if it's within 3, we're concerned that'll become like one of its tzitzis strings, and so then it'll be passive woman also, and it'll be a problem. We learned if the talis was torn beyond 3, you should sew it. Within 3, Meir says, don't sew chum, say to sew it. And both Rameir and the Chum agree that if the corner of a garment tore off, he shouldn't bring another piece of clothing containing tzitzis and attach it. Why not? Because in that case, the tzitzis were already made. And so it's again the problem that you have to make it, it can't be made. The shavan maybe but that you could bring tzitzis that he removes from a different garment and hang it. As long as it's not torn. So you want to learn from here that you can remove tzitzis from one garment and put it on another garment? Maybe maybe if the first garment was torn, then you could do that. A talis which is entirely tcheles, entirely blue, you could use any color tzitzis, except for indigo. You can't use the indigo. Maybe more challenges. Talis aim poter by alamina that only the same type of colors can exempt it. Talis shakua tcheles, maybe tcheles v'davar acher tobo. If it's talis that's entire tcheles, you can bring tcheles and another kind and attach them. Mikala ilan lo yevin via may be kosher. That if you brought the indigo, will be okay. In the first price, we're dealing with a garment that has only 4 tzitzis threads. The second one, we're dealing with 8 tzitzis threads. 2 tcheles and 2 of indigo. That's not valid because they're all the same color. The later price refers to the case where you make 8 tzitzis threads, and then you have 16 strands. And the first 4 are 2 tcheles and 2 of another color, such as white. So we're not relying on the indigo there. The Gemara says, no, dilmi of it. It's only if you did it after the fact. Itmar, Rav Amar Matir mi begel beged. Rav says we don't remove tzitzis from one garment to another. Shmuel Amar Matir mi begel beged. Shmuel says we do. Rav Amar Madlika min ner l'ner. We don't kindle from one Chanukah light to another. Shmuel Amar Madlika min ner l'ner. He says you can use one candle to light the other candle. Rav Amar Einalach Rabbi Shimon begrira. Rav says the law is not like Rabbi Shimon when it comes to dragging, where basically Rabbi Shimon says, this refers to the case of whether or not you could do something on Shabbos which may indirectly cause something else to happen. So Rabbi Shimon says you're allowed to do it because it's something that's called davar she'eino miskavin. It's something that's not intentional. So Rav says we don't follow Rabbi Shimon there. Shmuel says the law is like Rabbi Shimon. Amar Abaye kol milei demar avid karav. He says, my teacher, Rav Bar Nachmani, always ruled like Rav. Except for these 3 cases, he ruled like Shmuel. Because he said, Matir mi begel beged, he said we can move from one garment to another. Madlika minero and you can lie from one Chanukah candle to another. Malach Rabbi Shimon begreira. And the law is like Rabbi Shimon when it comes to dragging. The time Rabbi Shimon Omer Gor Adam Mita Kisa V'Sav So Bavachol Yiskaven Lasos Charetz. You're allowed to drag something on the ground on Shabbos as long as it's not your intention to make a ditch. Rabbi Yehuda Matzar Le'Lakatz. Rabbi Yehuda gave his garment to the laundromat, and he wasn't concerned that the tchelos would tear and that he would replace it with indigo. Rav Chanina Avad Sisa, he would roll the tzitzis into a ball to ensure that they wouldn't tear. You know the joke, the guy brought his towels to be cleaned in the dry cleaners, and he came back and he gave him some extraordinarily high price. He said, why is it so expensive? He said, he had to pay extra to remove all the knots. Ravina would sew them into the hem of the towel so they couldn't be replaced. Tan Rabbanan, Kama Chutin, who knows in how many threads do you place? Beit Shammai Omer Arba, Beit Hillel Omer Shlosh. Beit Shammai says 4, that's how we rule. Beit Hillel says 3 strings. The Kama Temeshel Shalosh, and how much should it hang down? Beit Shammai Omer Arba, he says 4 fingers. Beit Hillel Omer Shalosh. Beit Hillel Omer, and the 3 that Beit Hillel say, each one of them measures 1/4 of a handbreadth of the average man. Amar Papa Tefach Deraisa, this biblical handbreadth is Arba Begodel. It's 4 in the thumb, Shis Bekitna, 6 with the little finger, Hamesh Betilta, 5 with the third finger. Amar Ravuna arba betoch arba u'mishaleshes arba. The tzitzis should consist of 4 folded threads within 4 finger breadths of the edge of the garment and should hang down 4. Rav Yehuda Amar shalosh betoch shalosh u'mishaleshes shalosh. Amar Papa Hilchasa arba betoch shalosh u'mishaleshes arba. That's the law is that it should hang down 4 folded threads affixed within 3 finger breadths and should hang down 4. The Gemara says, you mean to say there's a specific amount. Tzitzis ain't tzitzis ela yotze. Tzitzis means something that goes out. Ain't tzitzis ela mashu. It means something that's protruding a little bit. It doesn't need to be an amount. They went up to the attic and they said, tzitzis ain't lashir. There's no amount. Also, there's no size of the lulav that it requires to be. My love English shir call doesn't mean there's no measurement at all. Gemara says no English shir amount. There's no maximum amount, but there's a minimum. Because if you're not going to say that there's a minimum, do you want to say that there's no minimum amount for the lulav? But we know lulav that has 3 tvachim, enough to wave it is kosher. There's no maximum, but there is a minimum amount. All right, we'll stop here. God willing, we'll go over this obviously on Shabbos afternoon in much greater depth. We'll stop here. Baruch Hashem.